Welcome in, everyone. Think of me as your enthusiastic compliance coach for today. We're jumping straight into a really crucial explainer on the SACCO Society's non-deposit taking business regulations of 2020. Now, specifically, we're zeroing in on Part 13, which covers regulation and supervision. Look, I know that sounds like dry legal text, but trust me, it's not. This is essentially the definitive playbook on exactly how the authority governs, inspects, and, well, penalizes SACCOs when things go wrong. By mapping all of this out today, we're going to transform all that complex regulatory jargon into a super clear, actionable roadmap for you and your organization. Okay, let's dive into this agenda. We're actually moving along a sort of severity escalation arc today. We're going to start with routine checkups and move all the way up to the absolute nuclear options. So we'll cover 1. The authority's supervision powers. 2. Administrative sanctions and directives. 3. The cease and desist. 4. Individual officer accountability. 5. Statutory management takeovers. And finally, number 6, financial penalties and appeals. All right, Section 1, the authority's supervision powers. Let's set our baseline. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the absolute nature of the authority's access. To set the baseline here, you have to understand that the authority isn't just some distant watchdog. They are incredibly active in making sure your SACCO aligns with the Act, your bylaws, and all your risk management frameworks. The key word here is unlimited. They have unlimited access. And that means exactly what it says. They can walk right into any premises where they believe your books or records are kept. They can compel any officer or employee to hand over accounting records on the spot. They can even open up or physically force you to open any strong room, any safe or security facility. When an on-site inspection happens, there are quite literally no hidden corners. So, say they do an inspection. What happens next? Well, if they find gaps, the clock starts ticking immediately. You'll receive a report of proposed corrective actions from the authority. And here's the kicker. Your board of directors does not have months to sit around and debate this. They have a strict, highly action-oriented 15-day timeline. Within those 15 days, the board must officially pass a resolution and submit a formal deficiencies restoration plan that actually satisfies the authority. It's all about rapid, decisive action. Moving on to Section 2, Administrative Sanctions and Directives. This is where we start turning up the heat. When the authority spots unsafe business practices or compliance lapses, they aren't just going to ask nicely for you to stop. They issue administrative sanctions. And these aren't just minor slaps on the wrist. These sanctions are built to immediately freeze a SACCO's growth and cut off any internal rewards. If they think your financial condition is shaky or your management is dropping the ball, they can straight up prohibit you from paying out dividends to your members. They can suspend all your new lending operations, stop you from acquiring new property. They can even ban the payment of any bonuses or salary incentives to officers. It's a stark warning. Non-compliance will literally cut off your financial momentum overnight. Section 3, the cease and desist. So if administrative sanctions are like a freeze, a cease and desist is a targeted strike. When unsafe practices are actively occurring, this formal intervention comes into play. And I want to be super clear. This order is not a suggestion. It's not a warning. It is a legally binding mandate. It lays out exactly what actions need to stop, specifically who needs to stop doing them, and the exact time frame for it to happen. The authority signs it, and it's served directly to the board of directors. You absolutely cannot ignore it. So, the crucial point is this specific figure, 100,000 shillings. If an officer of a SACCO causes the society to violate a cease and desist order, or honestly any guidelines issued by the authority, that individual officer becomes personally liable. We're talking about a financial penalty of up to 100,000 shillings out of their own pocket. At this point, the protective shield of the organization just drops, and the authority comes directly for the individual. Which brings us perfectly to Section 4, Individual Officer Accountability. The 2020 regulations take personal liability incredibly seriously. There is a massive, massive divide between what happens to the organization and the deep personal ruin an officer can face. For the SACCO, liability might mean halting business operations or freezing assets and paying institutional fines. But for an officer, it's severe. If you're removed for disciplinary reasons, you are slapped with a minimum 3-year ban from holding office in any SACCO, and the authority can make it even longer. It's not just getting fired, it's total banishment from the sector. Plus, you could face personal financial recovery if you cause the SACCO to lose money. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what kinds of behaviors will trigger that immediate removal. The authority doesn't hesitate here. You will be immediately removed if you're involved in fraud or if you're adversely mentioned in a law enforcement inquiry report. And here's a huge one. If you, as an officer, have a non-performing loan and become a bad debtor to your own SACO, you're out. The same goes for breaching your fiduciary responsibility, especially if it results in SACO losses so that someone gets an unfair financial gain. It is a fast track right out the door. Now for Section 5, Statutory Management Takeovers. This right here is the ultimate nightmare scenario for any board of directors, the total, absolute loss of control. Statutory management is the nuclear option. This is when the authority appoints a statutory manager who just steps in and completely takes over the SACO. The second this is ordered, the general meeting of members, the board of directors, the management teams, all of their powers are completely suspended. Done. The statutory manager operates purely on behalf of the SACO. This is triggered by continuous defiance, massive capital erosion, or if the management just totally abandons the members' best interests. And a major trigger for this takeover comes down to one number: 50%. If your SACO's core capital drops below 50% of the regulatory requirement, the regulations state that the SACO's financial soundness is officially threatened. Hitting this critical threshold of capital erosion gives the authority all the grounds they need to step in and save the institution from its own management. Let's move on and see how this builds, because the accountability doesn't just start on the day of the takeover, it actually looks backwards in time. When that statutory manager takes over on day 0, any gratuitous asset transfers made within 1 full year prior are immediately revoked. Those assets have to be surrendered back to the authority. Furthermore, if any loans were given to an officer, their family, or their business associates on preferential terms within the last 12 months, recalled immediately, and those individuals have to refund the money, with interest, right away. Basically, you cannot drain the ship right before it sinks. Finally, Section 6, Financial Penalties and Appeals. Let's wrap up this escalation arc. So, how does the actual penalty process work for officers who cause losses or submit incorrect information? It's strict, but it is structured. First, the authority has to give the officer a 14-day written notice of the penalty. Then, the officer does have the right to submit written representations. Once the penalty is formally assessed, though, the guilty party has to pay it via an electronic funds transfer within 30 days. And if you don't pay, the authority can direct your immediate removal, ban you from serving in any cooperative society for life until it's paid, and even start civil tribunal recovery proceedings against you. Now, if an officer or the SACO feels the assessment is unfair, they do have one channel for recourse. They can appeal directly to the cabinet secretary. So after walking through all of that, I have to ask, is your SACO ready for an unexpected on-site inspection tomorrow? Based on everything we've just mapped out, from unannounced safe inspections to deep personal officer liability and total statutory takeovers, this isn't something you can take lightly. Compliance is not a sometimes thing, It's an everyday absolute requirement to protect your members and your officers. For specialized consulting on these matters and to see how this roadmap fits your organization, please reach out directly at 0107 719 089.